What up, everybody? Welcome back to the Cafecito and Kane Show, Tuesday night edition. As you see, we do have a guest joining us now in a few minutes. Joe from the Ruffino and Joe Show. I know some of you guys probably follow him. For those of you that don't, they have a very good show, and I provided the link down there in the description. So please go check that out. They put out really good content, in my opinion. College football in general, and talked a lot about the Canes this past season. Them with Cam Ward and all that, all the exposure that we got. They were talking about them a lot, and had critiqued them at times, had some good things to say at times, but we will bring him on in a second here. But thanks, guys, for being on with us. Please hit the like button on your way in. Do not forget, and please hit the subscribe button. I see he is. I think he's ready. I don't think he'll mind if I bring him in a couple minutes early. You good? All right, cool. Let me bring him in right now. Joe,
how's it going, John? Not much. How you doing?
Good. Got to tell you, man, I know I reached out to you before, but I got to say, in over video now, I'm a big fan of your guys' show. I stumbled onto it this or maybe the season before last, and I always thought, you guys talk about the Canes not in a hateful way, but not in like a Kool-Aid drinking way. You guys are very honest, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like what these guys have to say, so But so I appreciate you being on, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, and I laugh at you saying not in a hateful way, because I was really positive about Miami this season. I was really hoping that they were going to finish the year, but a lot of Miami fans don't like what Blake has to say. A lot of people assume he has some sort of inherent bias against Miami, but to Blake's credit, he was one of the early people that pointed out that there was just one shortcoming that was going to hold him back, and that was just lack of tackling on the back end and lack of performance from the secondary. Hopefully this year, some of those issues are improved and they were aggressive in the portal, and that jump can happen. I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later on, but you're very excited to chop it up and talk more about this Miami team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I gotta have him on at some point too. But I remember him saying that, and I'm like, I don't like what he's saying, but I think he's right. Like halfway through the season, I remember that. It was like around the Louisville game.
Yeah.
But yeah, Juan, who's a regular in the chat, he had a very good question here. He wants to know, do you see Carson Beck being maybe more of the 2023 version, game managing, distributing the ball around, not turning the ball over? Can he win a big game? Tennessee is an example, but he can cost you a game too. Yeah. So let's start right out of the gate. Carson Beck. Thoughts on that acquisition? He had a great 2023, I thought. Not as good 2024, but to be fair, a lot of drop passes. He didn't really have the supporting cast around him. Like, what were your thoughts on that? Obviously coming off the heels of Cam Ward.
Yeah, I think that the 2023 version is likely the version that Miami is going to have. I don't think he's going to be to that same degree where like he was at the very edge of the Heisman conversation. He was at the edge of the first round conversation. I don't know if he's going to be 100% there, but I think 80% towards that ceiling that he showed that he can be. And the reason for this, the first half of the year, it wasn't all his fault. He made some brutal decisions, but if we go back and we look at some of his performances, a big part of it was the offensive line play. The offensive line was banged up. His receivers were dropping a ton of passes. There was inconsistent availability for his running backs. And frankly, I thought that Mike Bobo this year at Georgia was not setting him up to succeed. Many people were blaming Beck, but it just felt like that whenever they were calling rushing plays, it was not in the right situations. They were throwing the ball way too much. And because it was so obvious what their approach was, defenses were able to prepare for it. And he was set up to fail. When things were flowing a lot better and Trevor Etienne came back and the receivers were playing a little bit better as well, there was that final stretch of games that Carson Beck had where it was the old version of him. He was starting to regain that confidence. part of me kind of wonders what Georgia would have been like if he was available during the playoff and he didn't get hurt the way that he did in just such a stupid play. But I think that version could be the version here at Miami. And one of the biggest parts of it is he's got a better play caller. I don't know if what his receiver room is going to be like, because Miami's losing some guys from last year. Losing Elijah Arroyo is going to be tough, and Sam Brown's going to be tough. But I think that Shannon Dawson is going to set him up to succeed. We saw Cam Ward, who is extremely mistake prone, but very gifted. He's got a much bigger arm than Carson Beck. They're not comparable from a prospect standpoint, but we saw Cam Ward be set up to succeed despite being a risky quarterback, being a risky decision maker. I think that Carson Beck is going to be unlocked. I think he's going to play great. I think he can put up some great numbers, and I think he is ultimately the key for them finally reaching the college football playoff.
I mean, that's music to our ears. I hope it comes to fruition. I think we're all hoping that. I think we see the potential there. Certainly now we're 4 years in. A lot of Miami fans really kind of agree that, hey, in 2022 when Mario got here, he did not have the roster.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that were, you had some 4-star recruits, some blue chippers, but a lot of busts, a lot of guys that didn't really fit the culture. Now, 4 years in, you don't have that excuse anymore. You got the roster now. You got the talent. And really, as long as you don't have a mistake-prone quarterback, I think, you'll be fine. But on that, Carson Beck, here's the bad news, though. As I'm sure you know, he's still recovering from his procedure on his elbow. We're not going to have him in the spring, so he's not going to have a chance to build that continuity, that chemistry with his new receivers. How much can that affect a guy like Carson Beck? Or do you think that, hey, he's a veteran, he's a pro's pro at this point, he doesn't really need as much time as the typical quarterback?
There's definitely going to be a negative effect, because any quarterback entering a new situation where it's a completely new roster, it's a new room of guys that he's never been around, it's a new system, it's a new offensive coordinator, it's a new head coach that he has to get to. There's so many variables. It's not like he's just stepping right back in to where he started last year. So that is going to be an uphill battle. But to what you just brought up here, this is a guy who's seen so much. He has been through a lot of reps on the field. He's been through a lot of reps off the field as a backup at one point. I think that he's smart enough and seasoned enough to take advantage of that and to know how to still prepare despite not being on the field. But yeah, I can't sugarcoat it. I think that that's certainly going to be a negative. And more specifically dealing with an elbow injury like that, he could be ready to go, but we don't really know game one if the ball is going to have the same type of zip on it. And he's somebody who mostly was an average arm strength, like a slightly above, maybe just like a little bit slightly above average arm strength type of a prospect, that without having the real juice on the ball and coming off of the elbow injury, the first couple of games could be a little bit rocky. I hope that's not the case, but it's something that I think needs to be emphasized to Miami fans, that there should be a little bit of patience here. It shouldn't just be, immediately frustrated if the first couple of games aren't great.
Yeah. We do face Notre Dame week 1. And I believe Florida week 3. Good thing is they're both at home, but yeah, talking to other Cane fans, we're all kind of thinking, yeah, it's probably going to be a very run heavy, first few games, maybe grind out a couple of victories, which I think with our O-line and Cristobal's style, I think we're certainly capable of doing that. But real quick, you mentioned earlier, the defense, this, being the thing, the back end of the defense being the thing that held us back. Ultimately, I'm sure you watched games here and there. You watched a little tape on them. What stood out to you? Was it more of a player issue in your eyes? I'd love to get a third party perspective. Someone who's not a Cane fan. What was it? Was it a lack of talent in your eyes? Poor coaching? What did you see when you watched it?
Honestly, I thought a lot of it came down to poor coaching. I really thought that you saw it kind of reminded me of Alex Grinch when he was coaching at USC, where there was such a desperation to try and force turnovers. And sometimes coaches will literally teach this philosophy of just try and make a play on the ball. Don't go for the tackle, because he doesn't trust his defense to make plays elsewhere. It felt like at times in the beginning of the year, they were so turnover dependent that when they weren't producing those turnovers, and some smart offensive coordinators that they faced, Like Wake Forest was a good example. Duke was a good example where they kind of hung around for a little bit in those games. Georgia Tech, they ended up losing against a smart offensive coordinator. Taking advantage of that over aggressiveness led to a lot of big plays because there was no tackling. I think that with this philosophy change that's coming this year, I think that things are going to be very, very different. You're bringing in a hard-nosed defensive coordinator from Minnesota who, like, I love just the whole move in general of going after a guy who was coaching the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be physical up front. You need to play technically sound defense. And Minnesota was so dominant on a game-by-game, not on a game-by-game basis, but for like most of their season last year, despite being really void of premier NFL talent, unlike what Miami is bringing into this upcoming season. So that's where the biggest sign of optimism has to be. A lot of my issues with Miami, it felt like it was coaching related.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. Some people say, it maybe lacked talent a little bit, but I don't think we didn't have scrubs on that side of the ball either.
Right.
You know what I mean? We saw lack of communication. This is one thing that we noticed a lot of. Anytime a guy went in motion, I mean, the guys like looking at each other all confused, doing jumping jacks like, hey, that's your guy, that's my guy. Like a lot of that was happening. But yeah, let's see what James Kane has to say here. Miami had the same problem with Manny Diaz as DC relied on turnovers because offense was predictable and had tackling issues. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that far back, but definitely we relied heavily on the turnovers. That was the dawn of the turnover chain and all that stuff. But at least with Manny Diaz, we had like top 25, top 20 defenses.
Right.
And I feel like we didn't even sniff that. And the weird thing is, Lance Guidry came in 2023, and our defense, with all the injuries we had, was pretty solid. So we're kind of at a loss as to what happened. As of whatever it was, he's gone now. We got somebody. He got somebody new. So, and you told me you liked the hire from Minnesota. I mean, what specifically do you like about Heatherman?
I think that, like, for Heatherman to see that some of the young contributions that they had from their secondary, Coy Parrish is one guy who was a freshman this past year that was really good. Man, the one safety that they had that the Giants just drafted is completely escaping my mind that they also had. But there's been a lot of quality defensive back play from Heatherman, from this Minnesota-led defense. And I also thought that what was really notable this year, statistically, they were at the top of most categories. The run defense was really good. Miami has recruited really well along the lines of scrimmage, so they're going to be able to activate that as well. I'm trying to remember if I remember it exactly correctly, but when I was playing, I played at the University of Rhode Island in college. And I believe I went up against Heatherman when he was at Maine, I believe. And I just remember back to when he was there, it was a complete, like, we played some of our worst games against them, and that Maine team was one of the best teams in the CAA. So you're bringing in a guy who multiple stops at James Madison as well for a period of time when Kurt Signetti was there. Multiple stops, this guy has completely transformed defenses, and most of the teams that he's been with have been extremely defensively stout.
Yeah, and he's a former quarterback himself, right, if I'm not mistaken?
That I didn't know. That's an interesting layer if he is a former quarterback. I always am entertained to hear about these guys that are, formerly were opposite sides of the ball for making these decisions. That's interesting. I didn't know he was a quarterback.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm 99% sure. I'll look it up really quick now. But yeah, no, I have seen that before, and it's interesting because you then get to see, you see how to attack a defense, and in learning that, you can apply it to making your defense better, I guess, so to speak.
Right.
Going back to the secondary, though, there's one guy I wanted to bring up. I would love to get your opinion on, because I don't think I caught you guys talking on this situation and that happened a few weeks ago with Xavier Lucas from Wisconsin. I'm sure you guys talked about it at some point. It was a big talk of college football because he kind of broke the transfer portal, basically. I'm just curious, what were your thoughts on that when that was happening? Because, basically circumvented the transfer portal in a way, just basically said, hey, no, I just want to go to school in Miami. I'll just become an athlete when I'm there.
Yeah, this had to have been one of the most ridiculous stories that could have happened, and I think that it really summed up the nature of the sport and where we are at the current moment, where there is an ability for anything to happen if guys don't want to stay where they are. And I think that ultimately Xavier Lucas bypassing the transfer portal the way that he did by basically just saying the transfer portal doesn't exist. He unenrolled and then enrolled at Miami. I think that that is going to be a rule going forward, that the NCAA or conferences are going to be really aggressive in preventing from, that they're going to implement to prevent this from happening again, because this completely undermines and defeats the purpose of having the transfer portal. I understand allowing for immediate eligibility, but we need the ability for guys to stick around for multiple years. And the reason why he was blocked from entering the portal is because he signed a multi-year revenue sharing agreement. I think that those revenue sharing agreements, if you're contractually obligated to be there for 2 seasons, you should be required to stay there for that period of time. I think that that is going to make the sport better. I think it's going to make these rosters better. I think these players are going to develop more. I think that we're going to see better football. This, I think, is going to be a one-off instance, but it was absurd. One of the most absurd things that we could have been given with all of the stupidity that has happened over the past couple of years with the transfer portal, with NIL, with everything.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, like, how could we miss that loophole for someone to...
I don't even know if I call it a loophole. It was just kind of like a middle finger. It was like, hey, screw you, I'm doing this.
And they couldn't do it. And NCAA was like, you guys figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I remember when it happened, I guess it was based on the whole revenue sharing thing, which technically wasn't official yet. I think that was part of the controversy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If I remember correctly, that was part of the controversy. And I think at the end of the day, like with all of this and the way that these moves are going to happen, that it just paints this picture of how easy and how much command players have over their decision-making, over their situation, which is a good thing. It's a good thing for the sport, but it's something that we've never had before. This is, I think, the most extreme example of that. Got it.
And by the way, I did confirm Corey Heatherman was a quarterback for Fitchburg State.
Yes.
From 03 to 05.
Yes. Yeah, he's a New England guy.
Yep. So yeah, but very cool. So sorry, lost my train of thought here. Let me get back to my notes here. Xavier Lucas. Yeah, so the transfer portal situation, I wanted to talk to you about that, like your thoughts on, college football, I guess the landscape, how it changes so quickly year to year. I mean, what it was 2 years ago isn't what it is now, what it was a year ago. Like, it's changing that rapidly. I'm sure you've been a fan for a very long time. Do you like the direction it's going? Are you like, because I'm torn. I want to see players get paid. I want to see players, for their image and likeness. Mm-hmm. I love when that first came out, and because I was like, man, they're responsible for so much revenue that comes into the school, right? People are paid to see them. It's, it makes sense that they get compensated for that. I feel that it opened up such a can of worms that with the transfer portal and blocked so many opportunities for these high school kids coming in because a school would rather go with a veteran to fill a spot. It's like, has it been more bad than good in your opinion, like all this?
I think that there's like two perspectives and ways to look at this. There's the current moment and how things are changing is the one perspective. And then the other is the forward outlook for what the sport's going to be in 10 years. I think at the current moment, everything that's going on, no, I'm not happy with it. I mean, it's a shit show. It is extremely inconsistent. As I said a second ago, the players have all the control, which is fine. They deserve to have the control because they are the product. Their performance on the field, their ability to play, they deserve the money that they're getting right now. But there's no governing body. There's no control being taken. The NCAA has given up, and there is now a free-for-all. Saying it's the Wild West is a cliche at this point, but it's true. There is anything and everything can happen at this current moment. It's a free market, which is ultimately fine. The frustration at the current moment, though, I don't think should reflect how fans of the sport feel about how it will look in the future. the current mess that we're seeing needs to happen. We need really bad negative examples to the extremes to happen in every situation in order for the future decision makers to know how to fix the sport. I know that seems so broad and it seems overly simplified in a way. And also, more importantly, when I say decision makers, we don't even know who that's going to be. We don't know if there's going to be a commissioner of college football. We don't know if the NCAA doesn't come back and finally hunker down and try to refocus and rebuild the structure of the sport and how it's going to look. But we need to see all of these guys and see the On3 graphics with guys in the portal that have 6 schools listed. We need to see the Xavier Lucas situations. We need to see the Diego Pavia situations to see guys bounce around from spot to spot and players get screwed out of their NIL deals and collectives or businesses or NIL agents screw players, all those things. They're really bad at the current moment, but we need those examples for when the sport is in its best possible position, where guys are getting paid, they're on multi-year contracts, there's a collective bargaining agreement, all of those things. We need these examples in order to make the sport better. So bit of a long-winded answer, but
no,
we need it to happen. We need everything that's happening right now to happen in order for the sport to get better.
Yeah, it keeps making me think that, like, at what point do they just take the student out of student athlete and they're just employees? Like,
I hope that doesn't happen because then we're too far gone. But I don't think that we will. I think that because there's still a level of importance for academics, and I think that some of these guys, for like 90% of the athletes that are there, understand that they're not going to go play pro sports. They understand that they need to get their degree in the 4 years, and they appreciate the degree that they're getting. But the other side of that is all the guys that are getting the huge contracts. So I don't think that ultimately that does happen, that they're only employees and there's no academic tie to it.
Yeah, real quick, do you see, because right now the Big Ten and the SEC, it's heading in the direction of it just being like a power 2. I mean, do you think like those two, like it's almost like it's them and everybody else? Because what I can see happening is kind of what they do in soccer, almost like a tiered system, is like Big Ten and SEC, they collect all these teams, and it's like the top 40, 50 teams in college football. They just play for their own championship. And then, 60 through 100 play for their own thing. It's like, because it's such a large field and it's such a discrepancy in talent and coaching and money and all that. I don't know. That's just kind of me thinking out loud. I don't know what you think of that, but that's kind of where I see it heading one day.
There was a one point where I like really thought that was going to happen. I've kind of calmed on that. The thought of the sport being structured like that it's good and it's bad, because the regionality of the sport is what made the sport so great. Because I fear if we do move towards 2 power conferences in this tiered system, that we lose that, and the sport doesn't have that same uniqueness that it once did. But the inverse of it, yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of schools that don't try. I think that there are a lot of programs out there that don't put any effort in. They complain and they bicker about how the sport is changing, and they had never put the effort in order to compete for championships. There realistically, I think, are 40 schools in the country that if they were fully focused and they had a large sum of money coming in from TV revenue, that they could at one point compete for a national championship. Like I think that is realistic. 40 to 50 schools that are able to produce a roster that's that good. The tiered system is the way to solve that. You need to be able to play your way into that top conversation. There was a book. I'm trying to see if I have it. There's this book that I read. No, it's the wrong one. Wait 1 second. I read this book, and I believe Greg Sankey also referenced reading it. It's called The Club, and it talks about the creation of the Premier League and how it's insane, the parallels of what the sport originally British soccer was like and what it is like now with the Premier League. How it originally was just it was an enormous amount of teams oversaw by one entity that was overseeing it, and that entity was completely mismanaged, and all the best teams had to deal with all these crazy levels of the sport. So what they did is they left and they brought some of the levels with them, and then that was what created relegation and all of those things. And it got to this point now where there's all this outside funding that comes towards building rosters. So I do think eventually that there is proof of, like what you just said, the way that soccer needed to change, the Premier League needed to change. eventually football could be in that same position because there's just too many teams for one entity to try and govern it.
Yeah. No, and it's just like you said, there's the majority of college football that's like they know the Kennesaw states of the world, the Wichita states, like they know they're not going to never play for that championship because even if they pump the money necessary into it, you still got to get the talent. You still got to get talent over there to convince them to come play at Kennesaw State. You know what I mean? It's like it's too long of a road to get there. So I agree. I think that's one of the possible solutions. Real quick, and last thought, I don't want to have you on too long. I brought up to you the whole situation with the spring games. That's another thing that's like the new thing that's changing with college football now. Maybe we see more teams go to this that they just don't have a spring game. Honestly, and knowing from having attended practices here and there, we all know they do scrimmages behind closed doors. They do kind of their own thing. The spring scrimmage that's televised, that's kind of like very vanilla. It's an exhibition. It's for the fans. Do you see more teams doing this, or do you think it's just kind of a dumb thing that this just like a one-off? A couple teams are doing it this year.
I hope that it doesn't end up going in that direction where they do completely remove them. I think that based on the reporting, I think it was Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports who reported on and spoke to different people outside of Matt Rule, who's been the most vocal about canceling spring games. I think that there is enough of a wide range of feelings toward this that they're not going to get completely abolished. I think that this concept of doing like OTA style practices is dumb. That's basically what they're already doing. These are young guys that need to be on the field. They need to hit each other. They need to work on their technique. Especially all offensive and defensive linemen, the only way that they're going to get better is by being on the field. They're not NFL athletes. NFL athletes, a lot of those guys have been playing for 10 or so years. Not all of them, but most of the top veterans have been around for a very long time, that they don't need the full contact reps. That's why they are placed in a completely different system. The biggest part about this, though, is I don't want to lose it because it's another part of the tradition of the sport. That is, of all the traditions that we can kill off and get rid of, that is one that I think is unnecessary to get rid of because it is something that is so important to a lot of fan bases to get to go to games and to be able to just to watch their team during the spring and see what the upcoming year is going to be like, and to be excited and just to hang out in a very casual setting during the spring when you don't get to see them at all for months at a time. So yeah, I really hope that they don't do this. I think that hopefully that there's not enough momentum to kill it. Yeah,
I don't think so either. It's kind of crazy that someone like Matt Rule at Nebraska, I haven't seen a Nebraska spring game in recent years, but I would imagine they're one of those fan bases that there's tens of thousands at the spring game.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal for their town. Tuscaloosa. I remember, God, this is back in the day. I imagine you're a little younger than me, but you probably remember Nick Saban, the year he took over at Alabama, 07, 08. There was 90,000 at the spring game, something crazy like that. So Colorado with Coach Prime, they had 50, 60,000, something like that. So it's a big deal for some towns.
Right. You don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose the momentum and the energy and the commitment from fan bases. And also, it's a revenue stream now. And you need as much revenue as you can get now that you're sharing it with the players.
1,000%. Now, Miami does something a little different where I think they're going to do it again this year. It's like, it's very private. It's on campus. University of Miami is it's a small private school with a very small setting that they can do a spring game, but they did it last year. It was a cool kind of different, intimate thing. Yeah, it's cool because you get to like chat with the players after, get autographs, get pictures. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it's something that's going to go away. I hope not. And I think, it's that nice break in the offseason, so the offseason doesn't seem so painfully long.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. They shouldn't get rid of it. But anyway, man, like I said, I don't want to have you on, past like 20, 25 minutes. I know you got your own stuff to do. So please let the people know where they can find you. Let them know about the Ruffino and Joe Show. Let them know whatever else you want to plug.
Yeah, no, John, appreciate you having me on. This was great getting the chat, and I'm I'm sure I'll be on again in the future. Follow me on Twitter at Joe DeLeone. It's draft season, so putting out a lot of great draft content on Twitter. And then also Ruffino and Joe Show on YouTube. We're live every single Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Appreciate it again. It was great getting to chat here and talk a little bit about Miami. And again, sure we'll get to catch up soon.
No, likewise, man. I'd love to. Maybe one day I'll have both of you guys on. That'd be cool. Maybe
it's like a risk.
You
won't get a word in.
But, hey, man, maybe during the season, get a nice little debate going. That would be cool. But yeah, man, let me let you go. Thank you, Joe, for being on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for all you guys rocking with us. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And as always, go Canes.